When my wife died, I never told anyone about the storage unit. Not my son, not my brother, not the lawyer who settled her estate. It was the one thing in my life that was entirely mine, entirely ours, mine and Rosalind's. And I kept it secret for 3 years, and I would have kept it secret until I died, if my son's new wife had not gone through my coat pockets one afternoon and found the little brass key, and asked me, with a smile that did not reach her eyes, what it opened. My name is Edmund Ashby. I am 71 years old, and I want to tell you the whole story of the storage unit, and of what was inside it, and of what happened when my daughter-in-law found the key, because it is the strangest thing that has ever happened to me, and because it taught me something about secrets, and about grief, and about the people who circle an old man's life waiting to see what he has that they might want. And if you are old, and you have kept something private and precious, something the world does not know about, then you need to hear how this went, because the finding of my key nearly cost me the one thing I had left of my wife, and it revealed, in the process, exactly who everyone around me really was. Let me tell you about Rosalind first, because the storage unit is really a story about her, and about what a marriage leaves behind when one half of it is gone. Rosalind and I were married for 44 years. She was a painter, not a famous one, not a successful one in the way the world measures success, but a real one, a serious one, a woman who painted every day of her adult life, whether anyone bought the paintings or not, and mostly they did not, because Rosalind painted difficult things, quiet things, the kind of paintings that do not match a sofa, and the art world, such as it is in a small city, never quite knew what to do with her. She sold a painting now and then, enough to feel she was a professional and not merely a hobbyist, but she never made real money from it, and she did not care, because Rosalind did not paint for money. She painted because she could not paint, because it was the way she breathed, and I loved that about her, loved that she had a thing in her life that was entirely hers, that no market and no critic and no fashion could touch. I want you to understand what it was to be married to a person like that, because it shaped everything I did afterward. Rosalind lived by a principle she never stated, but embodied completely, which was that a thing worth doing is worth doing whether or not anyone rewards you for it. She painted at dawn before the world woke, in a north-facing room we had built for the light, and she painted whether a show was coming or not, whether a painting had sold in a year or not, whether anyone in the whole world would ever see the canvas or not. I asked her once, early on, why she kept going when the recognition never came, and she looked at me as if I had asked why she kept breathing, and she said, "Edmund, the painting is not a message to the world. The painting is the thing itself. If the world never sees it, the painting still happened, and I still did the true thing, and that is enough. That has to be enough. Because if you make it depend on the world's applause, you will stop. And the ones who stop were never really painters. They were just people who wanted applause and picked a way to try to get it. 44 years of that. 44 years of a woman doing the true thing every single day for its own sake. And I loved her for it. And when she was gone, the paintings were not just paintings to me. They were the physical record of the purest thing I had ever known. A whole life lived without compromise, and I would have burned my own house down before I let anyone throw them away. And when she died, 4 years ago, of a cancer that took her slowly over a year, she left behind a lifetime of paintings, hundreds of them. 44 years of a woman painting every day, stacked and rolled and stored, canvases in every closet of our house, in the attic, under the beds, a whole life's work that the world had mostly ignored, and that I could not bear to part with, because each one was a day of her life, a thing her hands had made, and to throw them away or sell them off would have been to throw her away, and I would not do it. So after she died, when my son began gently to suggest that I should clear out the house, simplify, get rid of some of the clutter, by which he meant his mother's paintings, I did a thing I told no one about. I rented a storage unit, a large one, climate-controlled, And over several quiet weeks, driving back and forth alone, I moved every one of Rosalind's paintings into it, hundreds of them, carefully wrapped and catalogued, and I locked the door, and I kept the only key, and I told no one it existed, not my son, not anyone. It was my secret, my private cathedral, the place where my wife's whole life's work was safe, and I would drive there sometimes, alone, and let myself in, and sit among her paintings, surrounded by 44 years of her, and it was the closest thing I had to still being with her, and it was mine, and no one knew. I want to describe those visits, because they were the center of my life for 3 years, and no one in the world knew they happened. I would go on the hard days, the anniversary days, the days grief came up out of nowhere and knocked me flat, and I would drive to the unit and roll up the door and turn on the lights, and there she would be, everywhere, in every canvas, the way she saw the world, the particular blue she used for shadow that no one else used, the way she painted light as if it were a solid thing you could hold. I would unwrap a painting I had not looked at in a while, and it would be like hearing her voice. Because a painting is a frozen moment of a person's attention, and to stand in front of one is to stand where she stood, seeing what she saw, and for an hour, surrounded by hundreds of them. I was not a widower alone in the world. I was a man still living inside his marriage, and then I would wrap them back up and lock the door and drive home and tell no one, because the secret was the thing that made it mine, that kept it safe, that kept them from turning my grief into a transaction. Or so I believed, until the key was found, and I learned that a secret is only safe until it is discovered. And then it is the most dangerous thing you own. I need to tell you about my son, Nathaniel, and about his new wife, because they are the other half of this story. Nathaniel is my only child. He is not a bad man, but he is a weak one, and he has always been a man who wanted more than he had, and resented the gap. And after his mother died, that resentment found a focus, which was me, and specifically the question of what I had, and what he would eventually get. His first marriage had ended badly and expensively, and he had emerged from it financially wounded, and he had begun, in the years after Rosalind died, to look at me the way a man looks at a slow-moving inheritance, with a patience that had impatience underneath it, attentive in a way that was really appraisal. And then, 2 years ago, Nathaniel remarried. Her name is Sloane, and I disliked her from the first meeting, and I tried not to, because it is a hard thing for a father to dislike his son's wife. But Sloane was a person who calculated, openly, almost without bothering to hide it, and what she calculated, from the first dinner, was what the old man was worth. I watched her assess my house, my furniture, my late wife's jewelry, cataloging, pricing, and I watched her file it all away, and I understood that Nathaniel had married a woman who would make his vague, resentful appraisal of me into an active, organized campaign, and I was right. Sloane took over the management of my life with alarming speed. Within months of marrying Nathaniel, she had appointed herself the coordinator of my affairs, insisting on helping with my finances, my medical appointments, my household, all framed as care, all actually surveillance. Because what Sloane was really doing, I came to understand, was conducting an inventory, building a complete picture of everything I owned, so that nothing would be lost, by which she meant nothing would escape their eventual collection. Let me give you the specifics of the campaign, because the pattern only becomes clear in the details. It began with the mail. Sloane offered to help me sort my mail, so that I would not miss anything important. And in the sorting she learned every account I had, every statement, every institution I dealt with. Then it was the medications. She offered to organize my prescriptions, and in doing so, she learned my doctors, my conditions, my pharmacy, building the medical picture she would later use to suggest I was declining. Then the household. She reorganized my kitchen and my closets to make things easier for you, Edmund. And in the reorganizing, she inventoried my possessions, my late wife's jewelry, the good silver, the value of the furniture. Every act of help was an act of intelligence gathering, and she was patient and thorough about it, the way a certain kind of person is patient and thorough about the things they intend to own. And by the time she got to my coats, she had already built a nearly complete map of my life and my assets, and the only thing missing from the map, the one blank space, was the storage unit, whose existence she did not yet suspect until the afternoon she reached into the pocket of my overcoat, and her fingers closed around a small brass key. And it was in the course of this campaign of helpful surveillance that Sloane found the key. It was an afternoon in autumn. She had come by, as she increasingly did, to help, and she had offered to take my winter coats to the cleaners. A small kindness. And while going through the pockets, as one does before cleaning a coat, she found, in the inside pocket of my heavy wool overcoat, the small brass key to the storage unit, on its own little ring with a numbered tag. And she brought it to me, holding it up, and she said, with that smile that did not reach her eyes, "Edmund, I found this in your coat. What does it open? It has a number on it. Looks like a storage place. I didn't know you had a storage unit." And I felt, in that moment, a cold clench of alarm, because my secret cathedral, the one entirely private and precious thing I had left, had just been discovered, and discovered by the one person in my life most certain to want to know what was in it, and most certain to want, eventually, whatever it was. I did a foolish thing. I lied badly. I said, "Oh, that is nothing. Just some old junk I have been meaning to clear out. Boxes of tax records, that sort of thing." And Sloane looked at me, and I watched her not believe me, because a man does not keep the key to boxes of tax records in the inside pocket of his good overcoat, close to his heart, and a man does not go pale, as I am sure I did, when asked about tax records. I have thought since about how badly I lied, and why, and the why matters. I lied badly because I was ambushed, because the key appeared in her hand without warning, and my only instinct was to protect the cathedral, and panic makes for terrible lies. But there was something else too. I lied badly because I am not, at bottom, a liar, because Rosalind and I built 44 years on telling each other the truth, and the muscle for deception had simply atrophied in me, and when I reached for it in the moment I needed it, it was not there, and what came out was the clumsy, transparent lie of an honest man cornered. And Sloane, who lied fluently, effortlessly, as a native language, saw my clumsiness for exactly what it was, saw an honest man badly hiding something precious, and that told her more than a smooth lie ever would have. My bad lie told her, more clearly than the truth would have, that the storage unit contained something I cared about very much, and that I did not want them to know about it. And to a person like Sloane, that was not a closed door, it was a scent. She handed me back the key, pleasantly, and said no more about it that day, but I knew, watching her leave, that she would not let it go. A person like Sloane does not find a secret and forget it. She had learned two things that afternoon, that I had a storage unit and that I was hiding what was in it, and both of those facts went into her inventory, and I knew she would work at it, patiently, until she knew what I was keeping and had figured out whether it was worth taking. I want to tell you about the weeks that followed, because they were a quiet war, a war of a kind that old people fight all the time and that no one ever sees, the war to keep one private precious thing from being absorbed by the people who feel entitled to everything you have. Sloane's approach was patient and indirect. She did not ask about the unit again directly. Instead, she began to gather information. I learned later that she had, using the numbered tag she had glimpsed, actually located the storage facility, had driven there, had tried to charm the manager into telling her about the unit rented in my name, though the manager, a decent man named Cortez, who I later thanked properly, had told her he could not discuss a customer's unit with anyone not on the account, which frustrated her considerably. She began to mention, casually, in conversation, that storage units were such a waste of money, that I should really consolidate, that she would be happy to help me go through whatever was in there and get rid of what I did not need. She began, in other words, to lay the groundwork for gaining access, and I saw every move of it, because I was watching her as closely as she was watching me. And I understood that I was in a genuinely difficult position, because Sloane had, through Nathaniel, a certain kind of access to my life, and because I was 71, and because the campaign of helpful surveillance had already established, in the family's understanding, that I was a man who needed managing, and a man who needs managing is a man whose secrets are seen as symptoms, as evidence of the confusion that justifies taking his affairs out of his hands. I could feel the shape of the thing they might build, if they chose to, the narrative of the declining old man with the mysterious secret storage unit, the hidden hoard, evidence that he could no longer be trusted to manage his own life. And I understood that my secret cathedral could be turned, in the wrong hands, into the very instrument of my loss of independence. So I made a decision. I decided that I would not let them take Rosalind's paintings, whatever it cost, and I decided that the way to protect them was not to keep hiding them, because the hiding had become the vulnerability, but to do the opposite, to take control of the secret myself, to decide who knew and how, rather than waiting for Sloane to pry it open on her terms. But before I could act, Sloane acted, and she overplayed her hand, and it changed everything. What Sloane did was this. Impatient with the slow work of prying the secret out of me, she went to Nathaniel, and together they escalated, and one evening they came to my house, the two of them, with a proposal that was really an ultimatum dressed as concern. They sat me down, and Nathaniel, coached by Sloane, said the words, though it was clearly Sloane's script. He said, "Dad, we are worried about you. You are keeping secrets. This storage unit you will not talk about, and it worries us. Because when someone your age starts hiding things, it can be a sign that something is wrong, that maybe you are not managing as well as you think. We think it would be best if we took a more active role in your affairs, if you gave us access to everything, including the storage unit, so we can make sure you are safe, and nothing is being, mismanaged. We have talked to someone about power of attorney. We just want to take care of you, Dad. I had known this evening would come, from the moment Sloane found the key, but knowing a blow is coming does not soften it. To sit in your own living room and hear your only child, coached by his wife, describe your love and your grief and your privacy as symptoms of decline, as evidence that you can no longer be trusted with your own life, is a particular kind of pain that I hope you never know, because the cruelty of it was not the grab for control, ugly as that was. The cruelty was that they had taken the most tender thing about me, the fact that I had loved my wife so much I could not bear to part with her paintings, and had reframed it as madness, as the confusion of a failing mind, so that my deepest love became the very evidence used to justify taking everything from me. That is the true violence of these campaigns. Not that they steal your things, but that they steal the meaning of your things. Turn your love into a symptom, your grief into incompetence, your most human tenderness into the case against you. And there it was, laid on the table, the thing I had seen coming. The secret storage unit, my private grief, my wife's life's work, was being used as evidence of my supposed decline, as the justification for a power of attorney that would hand Sloane the keys to everything. And once she had those keys, the paintings, and the house, and all of it, would flow, over the following years, into whatever use she saw fit, and I would spend my last years as a managed old man, my wife's paintings sold off or thrown away as clutter, and myself reduced to a beneficiary of the very people who had taken everything. I looked at my son, who could not meet my eyes, and at Sloane, who could, who was watching me with the cool attention of a person waiting to see if the pressure would work, and I understood that this was the moment, that everything depended on what I did next, and I understood, with the clarity that sometimes comes at the worst moments, exactly what I had to do. I did not agree, and I did not argue, either, because arguing would have fed their narrative, the agitated, confused old man resisting help. Instead, I did something that surprised them completely. I said calmly, "You want to know what is in the storage unit? All right, I will show you, both of you, tomorrow, and I will show you with my lawyer present and with a witness, because I think it is time this family understood exactly what is in that unit and exactly what I intend to do with it. Meet me there at 10. And I watched Sloane's face, and I saw the flicker of triumph, because she thought she had won, thought the pressure had worked, thought she was about to gain access to the hidden hoard she had been circling for weeks. She had no idea what was actually in that unit, or what I was actually about to do. I did not sleep that night. I sat in Rosalind's studio, the north-facing room where she had painted every dawn for 44 years, empty now, except for the smell of oil paint that never quite left, and I thought about what I was about to do, and I understood that it was the most important decision I had made since her death. Because I had a choice. I could keep fighting to hide the paintings, keep them secret, keep them mine, and spend whatever years I had left defending them against Sloane's patient siege, and probably lose in the end, because I was one old man, and they were organized and had time on their side. Or I could do the harder, stranger thing, which was to give the paintings away, permanently, to place them so far beyond anyone's reach that the fight would simply end, because there would be nothing left to fight over. And I realized, sitting in that studio, that hiding the paintings had always been about me, about my grief, my need to keep her close, and that Rosalind herself would not have wanted them hidden in a dark unit for one man's private comfort. She had always said the work was not for her, and not for me, but for the ones who would come after. Keeping them secret was loving her the way I needed. Giving them to the world was loving her the way she would have chosen. And once I understood that, the decision made itself, and I picked up the phone. That night, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, a sharp woman named Priya Chandra, who had handled Rosalind's estate and knew what the paintings meant to me. The second was to someone I had been meaning to call for 3 years and had never quite had the courage to. A woman named Helen Whitfield, who ran a small but serious art gallery in the city, and who had, years before, at one of Rosalind's rare shows, told me that she thought my wife was one of the most overlooked painters in the region, and that if I ever wanted to do something with the work, I should call her. I had kept her card for 3 years. That night I called her, and I told her everything, and I asked her to meet me at the storage unit at 10 the next morning, and she said yes. At 10 the next morning, we all gathered outside the storage unit. Nathaniel and Sloane, expecting to finally see the old man's secret hoard. My lawyer, Priya, and Helen Whitfield, the gallery owner, whom Sloane eyed with confusion, because Sloane did not know who she was or why she was there. I unlocked the door, and I rolled it up, and I turned on the lights, and for the first time in 3 years, someone other than me saw what was inside. Hundreds of paintings. Rosalind's entire life's work, carefully wrapped and catalogued, 44 years of a woman painting every day, filling the climate-controlled unit floor to ceiling, and the sight of it, all together, was overwhelming. A whole hidden life, a whole hidden body of work, and I watched the faces. Sloane's face fell, because she had been expecting a hoard, money, gold, valuables, something she could convert, and what she saw was paintings. Hundreds of paintings by a painter she had never heard of, which to her meant clutter, junk, the very thing she had been calling it. And her disappointment was so total and so visible that it told me everything about her, that in the moment she understood the unit held no money for her, she lost all interest, all pretense of care evaporated, and what was left was pure naked calculation coming up empty. I want to slow down on the moment before Helen spoke, because it was the moment the whole thing turned. There was a silence in that unit while she worked, unwrapping painting after painting, setting them against the walls, stepping back, moving to the next, and the silence had a quality to it, a gathering quality, and I watched the 3 other faces in the room during that silence. Sloane, bored, checking her phone, having already written the whole unit off as junk. Nathaniel, uncertain, not knowing what he was looking at. And Priya, my lawyer, who did not know art but knew people, watching Helen with growing attention because she could see, as I could, that something was happening in the gallery owner's face, that she was not politely humoring an old man. She was in the grip of a genuine professional astonishment, the astonishment of an expert who has walked into a room expecting nothing and found something real. But Helen Whitfield's face did the opposite. Helen Whitfield walked into that unit, and she began to unwrap paintings, one after another, and I watched her face change, watched an art professional realize what she was standing in, and after 20 minutes of moving through the work in something like reverence, she turned to me, and her voice was not quite steady, and she said, "Edmund, do you understand what you have here? This is a complete body of work. 44 years, uninterrupted, a whole artistic life, intact. This almost never survives. Artists' estates get scattered, sold off piece by piece, lost. This is whole. And Edmund, the work is extraordinary. I told you years ago Rosalind was overlooked. I was underselling it. This is a major body of work by a serious artist, and it is entirely intact, and it is entirely unknown, and that combination is, I am not exaggerating, the kind of thing that makes a gallery's reputation, that gets written about, that ends up in institutions. This is not clutter, Edmund. This is a treasure, and I do not mean sentimentally. I mean actually, in every sense, including the one your daughter-in-law cares about." And I watched Sloane's face change again, a third time, as she understood that the paintings she had just dismissed as junk were in fact valuable, potentially very valuable, and I watched her recalculate at lightning speed, watched the interest come flooding back, and it was the most revealing thing I have ever seen, because I now knew, beyond any doubt, exactly what Sloane was, a woman whose care and whose contempt were both simply functions of what she could extract, switching on and off with the estimated value of the thing in front of her. And that is when I did the thing I had planned, the thing that was the whole point. I turned to Priya, my lawyer, and I said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Priya, please proceed with what we discussed." And Priya opened her folder, and she explained to the assembled group what I had decided and set in motion the night before. I had, Priya explained, created a foundation, the Rosalind Ashby Foundation, and I was, that very day, donating the entire body of work, all of Rosalind's paintings, into that foundation, whose sole purpose would be the preservation, exhibition, and eventual placement of the work in public institutions, to be administered by a board that would include Helen Whitfield and other art professionals, and myself, for as long as I lived, and specifically not including Nathaniel or Sloane. The paintings were, as of the paperwork Priya held, no longer mine to be inherited, no longer part of my estate, no longer anything anyone could take through a power of attorney, or a will, or my death. I want to explain why I chose a foundation, and not simply to sell the paintings and keep the money safe, or leave them to a museum outright, because the choice was deliberate, and it matters. If I had sold them, the money would have become part of my estate, and the estate was exactly what Sloane was after, so I would have converted an untakeable thing into a takeable one. If I had simply willed them to a museum, the will could have been contested, delayed, fought over, after my death, when I was no longer there to defend it. But a foundation, created now, while I was alive and demonstrably competent, funded by an irrevocable donation of the work itself, was a fortress. The paintings no longer belonged to me, so they could not be inherited. They belonged to a legal entity whose charter fixed their purpose forever, administered by people who cared about the art and not the money. There was nothing to contest, because there was no estate question, no inheritance, nothing owned by a person who could be declared incompetent or pressured or outlived. In one morning, with one signature, I had moved my wife's entire life's work out of the world of family and money and grasping, and into the world of art and permanence and the public good, where the Sloanes of the world have no standing and no reach. And it was, I think, The cleverest thing I have ever done, and the only genuinely clever thing, and I did it for her. They belong to the foundation, to the public, to Rosalind's legacy, forever, beyond the reach of anyone who saw them as an asset to be liquidated. Sloane understood immediately what had happened, that the treasure she had spent weeks circling and had just watched appear before her eyes had in the same moment been placed permanently beyond her reach, and she did the thing that people like her do when they lose. She dropped the mask entirely. She turned on me, and her voice was flat and vicious, and she said I was a spiteful old man, that I was giving away a fortune that should go to my family, to strangers, to a foundation, that this was exactly the kind of irrational decision that proved I needed someone managing my affairs, and that they would contest it. And Priya calmly said, "Mrs. Ashby, before you say more, you should know that Mr. Ashby was examined by 2 physicians yesterday, both of whom certified his full competence in writing, and that this entire meeting, including your statements, is being recorded with everyone's knowledge, as I stated when we began. The donation is complete and irrevocable. There is nothing to contest, and I would advise you, as a matter of your own interest, to stop talking." Sloane stopped talking, and Nathaniel, my son, who had stood silent through all of it, finally spoke, and what he said was small and revealing, and the true measure of him. He did not ask about his mother, whose life's work he was standing in the middle of, and had never once, in all of this, expressed any feeling about. He did not grieve her, or marvel at what she had made. He said, quietly, staring at the paintings he had spent years dismissing as clutter, "So it was worth something. All along, and now it is gone. So it was worth something, and now it is gone. Not, my mother was a great artist and I never knew. Not, I am ashamed I called her life's work clutter. Just, the thing turned out to be valuable, and now I cannot have it." My son stood in a room full of his mother's soul and grieved only the money. I want to tell you what happened after, because the reveal is the middle, not the end. The Rosalind Ashby Foundation became real, and Helen Whitfield was as good as her word. She mounted a retrospective exhibition of Rosalind's work, the first proper show my wife had ever had, 8 months after that morning in the storage unit, and it was written about, seriously, in places that mattered, and the art world that had ignored Rosalind her whole life discovered her all at once, the way it so often does. Too late for the artist, but not too late for the work. And within 2 years several of her paintings had entered the permanent collections of real museums, and Rosalind Ashby, overlooked painter, became, posthumously, exactly the artist Helen had always known she was. The opening night of that retrospective was the proudest night of my life. Prouder even than our wedding, because at our wedding Rosalind was a young woman with everything ahead of her, and at that opening she was gone. And yet she was more present than I had felt her in years, because the room was full of her, her paintings on white gallery walls, properly lit for the first time, and full of people, strangers, standing in front of them, the way I had stood in front of them alone, in the storage unit, seeing what she saw, hearing, in their way, her voice. I watched a young woman stand for 10 minutes in front of one painting, a difficult, quiet one that had hung unsold in our hallway for 20 years, and I watched her wipe her eyes and I thought, there it is, Rosalind. There is the one you were painting for, the one who would come after, and she found you, and you found her, and it only took your whole life and 3 years in a storage unit and a foundation to make the introduction. I wished, more than I have ever wished anything, that Rosalind could have seen that room, and then I understood that in a way she had seen it every dawn for 44 years, because she had painted as if that room already existed, as if the stranger wiping her eyes were already standing there, and that faith, that painting toward a future she would never see, was the whole of who she was, and it had been justified, completely, at last. I go to the museum sometimes, now, and I stand in front of my wife's paintings, on the walls of institutions that will keep them forever, seen by people who will never know they were nearly thrown away as clutter, nearly liquidated by a daughter-in-law who saw them as an asset. And I feel Rosalind there. I feel the vindication of it. The woman who painted every day for 44 years, whether anyone cared or not, finally cared about, finally safe, finally permanent. And I think, I did that. I protected that. I kept the one promise that mattered, which was to not let her be thrown away. Sloane and Nathaniel divorced within the year. I will not pretend I was sorry. The marriage, I gathered, had been strained already, and the failure of the storage unit campaign, the vanishing of the treasure Sloane had counted on, removed whatever glue had held it, and she moved on, as such people do, to the next situation that might pay out. Nathaniel I did not hear from for a long while, and I understood the silence, because I had learned to read him, and it told me he was not grieving his mother or his behavior. He was grieving the loss of the money, and until he could tell the difference, there was nothing for us to say. He did come back, eventually, about a year later, alone, older, quieter, and he stood on my porch and said he did not want anything, and I let him in, because a father does, because Rosalind would have wanted me to, and we began, slowly, the work of being honest with each other. It was not easy, and it was not fast, and there were setbacks, because a man does not unlearn in a year the habits of resentment he spent decades building. But he tried, and trying, at 50, at the far end of a life shaped wrong, is harder and more admirable than getting it right when you are young and it costs you nothing. He asked me, once, why I had let him back in at all, after everything, after he had stood silent, while his wife tried to take his mother's soul and reframe my love as madness. And I told him the truth, which was that his mother had believed people could change, had painted, in a sense, her whole life toward the belief that a difficult thing offered patiently to an indifferent world might one day be received, and that if I did not extend to my own son the same patience she extended to a world that ignored her for 44 years, then I had learned nothing from being married to her. So I let him in. Not because he had earned it, but because Rosalind would have, and being her husband meant loving the way she loved, toward a future that had not arrived yet. And one day, months into that slow rebuilding, he came with me to the museum, and he stood in front of one of his mother's paintings, a real one, on a real wall, with her name on the little placard, and for the first time in the whole story, my son wept, not for the money, but for her, for his mother, for the years he spent dismissing her life as clutter. And I stood beside him and let him weep, because that weeping was the first true thing he had done in years, and it was, I understood, the beginning of him becoming a person his mother could have been proud of. So here is what I want to say to you. If you have listened this far, and if you have a secret, a private precious thing, a treasure the world does not know about, whether it is money, or paintings, or letters, or memories made solid, hear an old man who nearly lost his. The hiding of a precious thing feels like protection, and for a while it is, but hiding also makes it vulnerable, because a secret, once discovered, can be turned against you, made into evidence, used as a lever, and the people who circle an old person's life are very good at turning secrets into levers. The safest thing is not to hide your treasure forever. The safest thing, when the time comes, is to place it, deliberately, permanently, beyond the reach of the people who would take it, into the light, into a form that protects it forever, so that it can never be hidden again, and therefore can never be used against you. I did not lose Rosalind's paintings by revealing them. I saved them, by revealing them on my terms, and placing them where no one could ever take them. And the second thing, the harder thing, the value of a person, or a person's work, or a person's love, is not a thing the calculators can see, until suddenly it is, and then they want it, and that wanting tells you everything. Sloane dismissed my wife's life's work as clutter until the moment she learned it was worth money, and then she wanted it desperately, and the switch, the instant recalculation, revealed her completely, because a person who only values what is valuable who feels only about what pays out, is a person with a hole where the soul should be, and the kindest thing you can do, having seen that hole, is to place everything you love permanently beyond their reach, and let them have the emptiness they earned. My wife painted every day for 44 years, and almost no one cared, and I kept her whole life's work secret in a storage unit for 3 years, because I could not bear to let it go. And my daughter-in-law found the key and tried to turn it into a weapon, and instead I turned it into a foundation. And now my wife hangs in museums, safe forever, and the woman who tried to take her is gone, with nothing, which is exactly what she valued, and exactly what she was worth. Rosalind used to say that the work would outlast all of us, that she did not paint for the living, but for the ones who would come after. She was right. Her paintings will hang on walls long after everyone in this story is dust, and the people who tried to throw them away will be forgotten, and the work will remain, which is the only immortality any of us gets, and the only one worth having. She was usually right about these things. She was always right about the work. I kept one painting. I should tell you that, when I gave the whole body of work to the foundation, Helen and the board insisted I keep one for myself, for my own walls, and I chose the difficult, quiet one that had hung in our hallway for 20 years, the one the young woman wept in front of at the opening. It hangs in Rosalind's old studio now, the north-facing room, in the dawn light she painted by, and I sit with it in the mornings, the way I used to sit in the storage unit, except now it is not a secret. Now it is not a vulnerability. Now it is just a man, and the last thing his wife made, that he gets to keep close. And there is no key to be found, no lever to be turned, nothing anyone can take, because the rest is beyond the world, and this one is simply mine, in the light, in the open, safe. I just had to be brave enough, once, to make sure she got the last word. And she did.